The Philadelphia 76ers and Joel Embiid are reportedly contemplating what the next step is in his recovery from a knee injury. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Plus, the Sacramento Kings have a starters-only meeting after the recent loss. We're going to talk about all that plus more right after this.
Welcome to the number one place for your daily basketball news and analysis, NBA Central.
What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of NBA Central, your number one spot for everything basketball related. I'm the host, Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at NBA Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into it for today, y'all. And I want to start off talking about Joel Embiid. Now, I talked about this a little while ago before we really knew the extent of this when it came to Joel Embiid, is that the 76ers should really be looking and contemplating a move away from Joel Embiid. And I know that really does sound crazy, but when you look at it, it just comes down to the fact that Joel Embiid, he's not able to be healthy. And while for a long time the thought process around Joel Embiid was, well, Joel Embiid, even at 50%, is better than not having Joel Embiid at all. And it's reached the point now where that can no longer be said. Joel Embiid is clearly dealing with some major things. He clearly doesn't have the ability to rotate, leap, anything at all like he used to do. And it's actively hurting his team out there. And I think when you look at as well how Tyrese Maxey has stepped up as a leader this season, it makes it even more evident and clear, in my opinion, that if they're going to pivot off from Joel Embiid, now is the time to do it. They're 1.5 games back of potentially being in the play-in in the Eastern Conference. It makes no sense for them to try to fight for that. I know that they made a signing and all those type of things. At this point, the Philadelphia 76ers really should evaluate it, and it comes down to this. Hell, you have Stephen A. Smith asking if Joel Embiid should retire, right? And if there's that question, I think you have to move on from Joel Embiid until he does and let another team. And now, is our team's going to be big in on Joel Embiid? Maybe not, right? And that may be the problem there. If he's going to retire, cool, great. But if Joel Embiid is going to try to get surgery, there's even been talk of a meniscus replacement, which you take a cadaver meniscus and put it in. That's automatically a 12 to 14-month turnaround. I think that the Philadelphia 76ers should be looking to move to trade Joel Embiid. If any team is willing to take him on, whether it's into some salary cap or anything else, it's not even necessarily just about what you get back at this point. It's about clearing the deck of Joel Embiid, going with what you have. You had Jared McCain, who looked pretty good. You had Tyrese Maxey as a younger player as well. You got your own first-round pick going forward, right? You may not keep on in this one. It's top 6 protected this year. But I think it's paramount at this point that the Philadelphia 76ers, at bare minimum, should be planning for a life without Joel Embiid. And I mean not factoring him in at all. If he ends up being healthy, if he ends up getting surgery and coming back, great, right? But the thought process right now for the Philadelphia 76ers has to be that they have to find something. They have to find a future. They have to forge a future built around Tyrese Maxey. And that's just what I think that they have to do at this point in time. You traded for Quentin Grimes, another player that's under 25 years old. Probably need to look to keep him this offseason as well, right? You got Adem Bana, who you drafted. You got him. I think you should keep him for long-term as well. But other than that, Jared McCain, those type of players, it's time really to kind of start moving forward. Now, unfortunately, Paul George, Joel Embiid, they might not have the greatest trade value. Now, I think if Joel Embiid is able to, if he has a surgery and there's good outlook on it, cool, maybe great, maybe you can move on from him. But Paul George, who knows what you're going to be able to get back for him. He has 3 years left on his deal after this season. He's making $56 million in the last year of that deal. But it's time. And I get it. And I commend the Philadelphia 76ers for trying to hold out and what they put into this offseason, trying to put a team together that they felt, even if Joel was not going to be healthy, could do something, could make some noise. It just didn't work out. It didn't happen for you. And this was the wake-up call that you needed. It's time. It's time to move on from Joel Embiid. Now, let's say that the other factor of this. What if Joel Embiid is contemplating retirement? I don't personally think that he is, but there are people smarter than me that are closer to the game than me that think that may be a case for that. He's 30 years old. Maybe he does look to do something like that. Who knows, right? But I think that you have to try to, and even if you can't move Joel Embiid, you still got to try to make moves around your roster to where you feel like you're good. You feel like you can set in on at least a direction without worrying about what the future of Joel Embiid and how it impacts where your team is currently at. That's just what I feel. I know not everyone's going to agree with that, and that's perfectly fine. I would love to hear how you guys fill on that down below on what you feel the Philadelphia 76ers next step could be with everything going on around Joel Embiid. I would love to hear from that, hear from you guys on how you feel about that. But we'll see what happens with it in the long term. We'll see, right? But with that said, a team that, it got voted in as one of the worst front offices in the game of basketball. That is the Sacramento Kings. You look at them moving on from Mike Brown, how that kind of could have been a direct correlation to De'Aaron Fox asking for his trade out of Sacktown. You got all of this, right? And now you have this team that is just they traded De'Aaron Fox. They got Zach LaVine back in that move, right? And they just haven't been good. They moved to now 500 on the year. They dropped down to the 10th seed in the Western Conference. And the Sacramento Kings are another team that got to ask themselves some questions here as they go forward. You signed DeMar DeRozan this offseason, right? And I always say this, there's always a learning curve on learning how to play with DeMar. That's for any team. I don't care who you are, what your makeup is. There's always going to be a learning curve on understanding how to play with DeMar DeRozan. It just comes with the territory, right? But now, and adding Zach LaVine and having basically Chicago Bulls West when it comes down to that, they have to ask themselves, what place are they on with their franchise, right? And I'm sure they're looking at it to see how they finish this year as well, to kind of to inform them a little bit on that, right? You got Zach LaVine at $44 million. He's going into $47 million next year. He's going to be your highest paid player. You got Domantas Sabonis making $43 million next year. DeMar DeRozan making $24 million next year. Malik Monk with 18. Jonas Valanciunas with 10 because you made that trade for him. Keegan Murray, the last year of his rookie scale deal at $11 million, right? You got Devin Carter, who you just drafted as a rookie. And so you have this roster where you need to make a decision on what the next step is for them. Your pick is only top 12 protected. Otherwise, it's going to Atlanta. Seems like that may not convey for them. We'll see what the future holds there. You only get Charlotte's pick if it's between 15 and 30. That doesn't seem like it's going to happen. So there's a whole bunch of questions here. Now, the benefit, and this is why I say the Sacramento Kings have really put themselves right where the Bulls were, right? And not only with having a similar makeup to the roster, but also just with the personnel. But then you free up your pick for next year, right? And that's where I think that the Sacramento Kings have to make a very tough decision on what they want to do. How good do you think you can be? And again, they'll figure that out here over the last part of the season, right? But this Kings team has struggled with turnovers. DeMar DeRozan has had some big games as well with 34 points, 6 assists, 4 rebounds, and a steal, right? I believe that was against Golden State. But at the end of the day, like what are you fighting for, right? What is the path that you really have with this team? The team is 15-10 since Doug Christie took over. Cool, that's a solid rank. And I think that you see for what you've seen from Doug Christie's coaching, you can make a conversation where it makes some sense for Doug Christie's coaching to stay on, right? It is what it is there. But how they come out and keep going after the break, I think should tell them a lot about what the future needs to look like for the Sacramento Kings. Are they a team that they're going to have to look to burn it all down and rebuild again? Maybe keep Keegan Murray, see what you can get for these other players out on the market. They may even get more than what the Bulls just got back for Zach LaVine. We'll see what happens there. Or do you think that you can do enough in this upcoming offseason to where you can put some players around this that can make this better? Or maybe even another year of having these guys, because they didn't come into the season expecting for this to be the team. Maybe you build around that, those type of things. That's a huge question to answer. Now, where they have some benefit at is that with their roster right now, they are $30 million below the first tax apron, not even close to the second tax apron, right? So they have some flexibility in which they can use their full mid-level exception, which they can use some other exceptions and things that they have. They got those things at their disposal. So if they finish strongly enough here, right, to where they go through the plan, maybe win one game out the plan, maybe get eliminated after that, whatever it is, there's a world in which the Kings can convince themselves if we can get the right role players in here, the right supplemental players to what our core is, maybe we can be a team that can compete for an actual playoff spot to avoid the play-in, right? There's a world in which you can try to convince yourself of that. But it's just not as straightforward, and the Kings got to figure out what that road ahead really looks like for them, right? And we'll see what the future holds there. The Kings are a team that has talent, but it's also about how that talent fits, how that talent's coached. There's a lot of things that go into being a successful franchise at the NFL level, and the Kings got to ask themselves, are they the guys that can get that done? And we'll see. We'll see what happens there. Overall, I look at the Kings and I say this is an interesting team to watch out for. I can't say they're bad. I can't say that they're good. But we'll see what ends up happening out for them. And on the flip side of that, another team that's looking to start moving up is the Minnesota Timberwolves. This is the last topic that we're going to talk about today. Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo reportedly nearing their returns for the Minnesota Timberwolves. This is a team that there's been so much turmoil with them up and down over the course of the season, right? You cannot deny that this team has they got worse after the trade, which I think was expected. It was about the flexibility that it afforded them going forward. I've talked about before how the roster really that have parts of the roster that just doesn't fit together, right? And it's not just about Julius Randle, but throughout all of that, they still sit at 4 games above 500. They're in the 6th seed. They're only 1 game back of potentially avoiding the play-in. They are 4-6 in their last 10. They could use another player like Dante DiVincenzo to come back for that team. And this is a team that's going to be really interesting to watch here as the remainder of the season goes forth, because the Timberwolves have to ask themselves, much like the Kings, some tough questions about where they sit in the Western Conference and what can they do to get to that next echelon, right? You made the trade for Karl-Anthony Towns. Traded away Karl-Anthony Towns. You brought in Julius Randle, and it clearly has not had the impact that you've had. Jaden McDaniels has had a negative season. I've talked about him before, how it's not really him. Julius Randle actually has plus time with Rudy Gobert. He's actually plus with him, Gobert, and Anthony Edwards is on the court. McDaniels is the player that really, when you factor him into these lineups, it start getting worse. But again, I'm not blaming it all on him, but more so the makeup of the team overall. And so for the rest of the way, what happens with the Minnesota Timberwolves is drastically important here. And so I think that the Timberwolves are a team that they wanted that flexibility. They hope that moving off of Karl-Anthony Towns, the future flexibility that theoretically afforded them could have been something that they can. Now, Anthony Edwards has had an amazing season. I love Anthony Edwards. I would like to think that he's going to be a player that is going to be a draw, that players are going to want to play with Anthony Edwards. And that's great if that's the case, right? But you also got to look at this team and ask yourself, like, they're only $3 million above the first tax apron. They really won't start getting some of that big-time savings for the Karl-Anthony Towns deal until the season after next year, where they're $77 million beneath the first tax apron, right? And that's going to afford them some flexibility there. But they do have moves. They have trades. They have some contracts that they can look to move. And that's going to be the question that they have to ask themselves here. You got Anthony Edwards locked in for the foreseeable future. He's not going anywhere anytime soon unless you request a trade and you decide to give in to that. But you got Jaden McDaniels, a player that's been a net negative for you, making over $20 million here into the 2028-29 season, and he's locked in. Julius Randle has an option next year. It's a player option next year, so we'll see if he picks that up. More than likely, he's going to pick that up. What do you then do to pivot if he picks up that option? Do you trade him? Do you look to move him? Is anybody going to bite on that? You got Dante DiVincenzo locked in as well to the end of the 2026-27 season. Mike Conley's locked in until the end of next season. You got Rob Dillingham, the young player that you just drafted. What is he ready to step up next year? Terrence Shannon Jr., who hasn't really shown much. So this Timberwolves team is another team that I would say what they do, how they finish this season, right? In the play-in, in the playoffs, wherever it ends up finishing. How do they feel about that finish? And then what can they do to strengthen that team after that finish? That's the key thing here to watch out for. And I'll say this, I don't know if it's there for the Minnesota Timberwolves. I love Anthony Edwards. I like the potential of Rob Dillingham going forward into the future. Hell, I like Terrence Shannon Jr. for them, even though he hasn't played really any minutes for them this season, but I still like what he potentially brings as a 2 to 3 level scorer in the NBA level. But you haven't played him a whole lot, right? Because his shooting isn't there. So they got some things that they need to try to figure out this offseason. I don't know if they can. I don't know how long that runway is for them. But I think overall, the Timberwolves are another team that you got to look out and say, all right, what's the next step? What's next? The season went the way that it went for you. How do you rebound from this? Because you got Anthony Edwards there. And like what's happened with almost every single star that is developed in Minnesota, no matter how long they've stayed loyal to that franchise, you eventually have to move on from them. From Kevin Garnett. Stephon Mayberry before that. But Kevin Garnett, Kevin Love, Karl-Anthony Towns, right? You've had to move on from these guys because you haven't been able to build something sustainable enough to where you are an actual contender. What do you do now? You have Anthony Edwards, a player that people believe could be the face of the league. You got to try to figure this out. And you got to try to figure out and balance your assets to try to bring something to this team that makes sense. Now, where the Minnesota Timberwolves have, I guess, a bit of a benefit when you look at it, right, is that they have I'm sorry. I'm wrong on that. No, they have Utah's pick. Yes, they have Utah's pick. They have that between whichever one is the least favorable between that and the Cleveland pick. So they're going to have a first round pick this year. They're probably they may even have Detroit's first round pick because their pick's protected 1 through 13. Minnesota gets it if it's 14 through 30. So you could potentially have 2 first round picks in this draft. And if you get that, great. Then what do you do with that? Do you use that as bait to move some of these other pieces, or do you draft it? This is a deep draft. What do you do? Let me know what you guys think on that down below. That's my time for today, guys. Make sure you guys are following us at NBA Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. NBA Central Show at gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything basketball related. And I'll see you guys the next time I feel like making a video. Probably tomorrow. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.